The afternoon sun filtered through the windows of the corner cafe, painting everything in shades of honey and gold. Margaret Hayes sat at a small wooden table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. She was 38 years old, with soft blonde hair pulled back from her face, and wore a comfortable beige cardigan over a simple top. Her eyes held a mixture of hope and resignation, the look of someone who had been hurt before, but was willing to try again. Across from her sat Daniel Chen, a man in his early 40s with dark, neatly combed hair and kind eyes. He wore a well-tailored gray suit that spoke of success, but his posture was relaxed, approachable. His sister had arranged this blind date, and though he'd been hesitant at first, something about the warm cafe and the gentle afternoon light made him glad he'd come. They'd been talking for about 20 minutes. Small talk, mostly. The weather, the coffee, the hanging plants that adorned the cafe's windows. Margaret could feel her heart beating faster with each passing moment. There was something she needed to say. Something that would either end this date quickly or, well, she wasn't sure what the alternative might be. She took a deep breath. "Daniel," she said softly, setting down her coffee cup. "I need to tell you something. Something honest." He leaned forward slightly, his expression attentive. "Of course. Please." Margaret looked down at her hands for a moment, gathering her courage. When she looked up again, her voice was steady but quiet. "No one marries a fat girl, sir." The words hung in the air between them. She watched his face carefully, waiting for the familiar signs, the awkward clearing of the throat, the glance at the watch, the sudden remembrance of an urgent appointment. But Daniel's expression didn't change to discomfort. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, and a small, gentle smile touched his lips. "Is that what someone told you?" he asked. Margaret nodded, her eyes beginning to glisten. "More than one someone. My ex-fiancé, my own mother, if I'm being honest. Society in 1,000 small ways." She paused, gathering her thoughts. I didn't want to waste your time, or mine. I've learned it's better to be upfront about these things." Daniel was quiet for a moment. He took a sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving hers. Then he set down his cup with a soft clink against the saucer. "Margaret," he said, and something in the way he spoke her name made her heart skip. "Would you like to know what I see when I look at you?" She wasn't sure how to answer that, so she simply waited. "I see someone brave enough to show up today, even though you've been hurt. I see someone with a kind smile and eyes that light up when you talk about your work at the library. I see someone who loves her nephew enough to spend her whole Saturday helping him with his science project." He paused. "I see a woman who deserves to be seen for who she is, not judged by someone else's narrow definition of worth." Margaret felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. That's very kind of you to say." "It's not kindness," Daniel said gently. "It's truth. And as for what people say," he leaned back in his chair, his smile growing wider. "Let's prove them all wrong." She stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You want to keep seeing me?" "If you'll have me," he said simply. "I'd like very much to get to know you better, Margaret. Not in spite of who you are, but because of who you are." In that moment, sitting in the warm glow of the afternoon sun, something shifted in Margaret's heart. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. Those, she'd learned, rarely lasted. It was something quieter, deeper. It was the feeling of being truly seen for the first time in a very long time. "I'd like that too," she whispered. And so they talked. Not about weight or society's expectations or past hurts, but about life, about books and dreams and small moments of joy, about his work as the CEO of a sustainable packaging company and how he'd built it from nothing because he believed in leaving the world better than he'd found it, about her love of stories and how working at the library felt like being surrounded by 1,000 different lives. The hours passed like minutes. When the cafe began to grow, dim, and the owner started lighting candles on the tables, Daniel walked Margaret to her car. The evening air was cool and pleasant, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. "Thank you," Margaret said, standing by her car door. "For today. For everything you said," Daniel smiled. "Thank you for being honest with me. That took courage. Will I see you again? She asked, and this time there was no fear in her voice, only hope. How about dinner next week? He suggested. There's a little Italian place I know. Nothing fancy, but the food is wonderful and the owner treats everyone like family. That sounds perfect. As Margaret drove home that evening, she thought about all the years she'd spent believing the cruel words others had spoken over her. She thought about the walls she'd built to protect herself, and how lonely it had been inside them. But mostly, she thought about Daniel's smile and the way he'd said, "Let's prove them all wrong." It wasn't just about proving others wrong, she realized. It was about proving something to herself, that she was worthy of love, of kindness, of being chosen, not despite anything, but simply because she was herself. The autumn leaves danced across her windshield as she drove, and for the first time in years, Margaret Hayes allowed herself to believe in the possibility of happiness. Not the dramatic, earth-shattering kind that movies promised, but the quiet, steady kind that grew slowly, like a seed planted in good soil, the kind that lasted, the kind that healed, the kind that reminded you, gently but firmly, that you were always worthy of love. You'd just been waiting for someone kind enough to see it. And perhaps that was the greatest kindness of all,